bloodiest war on American soil. States versus states. Brothers versus brothers. Join hosts Bang and Dang as they take you battle by battle through the most divisive time in American history. Welcome to Battles of the American Civil War.
The capture of New Orleans, which took place from April 25th through May 1st, which is, I guess, still part of the battles of Fort Jackson and St. Philip, but kind of different because we know that, what's his name, just bypassed the forts and went straight to New Orleans, and then we got some fucked up shit by Burns from the Union stuff about to happen here. This guy was a douche. It was a turning point in the war, which precipitated the capture of the Mississippi River, having fought past Forts Jackson and St. Phillips, which you can go check out last episode. Union was unopposed in its capture of the city itself, which was spared the destruction suffered by many other southern cities. They're like, yeah, why would we destroy this one? It's kind of a significant city here.
You know, the history of New Orleans contrasts significantly with the histories of other cities that were included in the Confederate States, because it was founded by the French and controlled by Spain for a time. New Orleans had a population who were mostly Catholic and who had created a more cosmopolitan culture than in some of the Protestant-dominated states of the British colonies. Right, it's way different. Everybody knows New Orleans. That's a whole different world down there. Its population was highly diverse. In 1810 census, only 13% of the population was Anglo-American.
Yeah, man, French and Spaniards. And not only that, they differed drastically from any of the South states.
Oh, way big time.
All these white people and
crazy.
Surprised they even liked New Orleans, to be honest with you. The population of that time was made up mostly of French-speaking Creoles, refugees from Saint Domingue, and Haitian Revolution. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of Haitians in Louisiana, and ethnic French who had migrated here after the British takeover of French territory following the French and Indian War. While Spain had ruled the area briefly, they did not have numerous residents here. Okay, proved me wrong, didn't you? In addition, there were numerous enslaved African Americans.
Of course.
New Orleans had benefited more than some other cities by the domestic slave trade.
It's right on the frickin' mouth of the frickin' Caribbean.
Right. Well, Mississippi, but yeah. Industrial revolution, international trade, and geographical position.
Still be the mouth of the, I guess, Gulf of Mexico.
Right. It was a major port near the mouth of the Mississippi River at the Gulf Coast. The river carried freight and traffic from a huge network of rivers and tributaries, making New Orleans one of the most significant transportation centers in early United States before the establishment of railroad and road systems. Yeah, the mouth of the Mississippi was like the Hudson.
Right. Jeez.
Of particular significance were the inventions of the cotton gin in 1793 by...
What?
By?
No, what's his face?
Who invented the cotton gin?
Who's that one guy?
Eli Whitney.
Yeah, Whitney.
And the steamboat, which was invented in the early 19th century. Yeah.
He might have done the steamboat.
As soon as the steamboat...
he might have done the steamboat.
No.
I think it was the steamboat.
100% the cotton gin.
I don't think so.
Yes.
Cotton gin, 1793?
Yes.
I don't know about Eli Whitney and that.
Yeah, man.
Oh, it was.
But yeah, the steamboat probably made it more. You can actually go upstream and shit.
Right.
So...
I think they still do, like, steamboats and shit.
Down in New Orleans, yeah. All on the Mississippi River.
Before the steamboat, the keel boat. Men bringing cargo downriver would break up their boats for lumber in New Orleans and travel overland back to Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, or Illinois to repeat the process all over again.
Oh, so they would build a boat and then take it down, sell the lumber, and then go back and do it all over again. That's cool.
Right. Steamboats had enough power to move upstream along against the current of the Mississippi.
What'd I just say?
Making two-way trade possible between New Orleans and the cities in the interior river network of the upper South Midwest. After the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, which greatly expanded international trade and the development of the cotton gin, cotton became a valuable export product. They're like, oh, dang, this stuff is
Now
really
that we
valuable.
can separate it quickly.
Right. It became a major part of the volume of cargo moved through the city.
I'm sure it did. A formative event in the early history of New Orleans is the Battle of New Orleans, 1815, though. Dude, New Orleans has lots of battles, which was fought during the War of 1812, ironically.
Yeah.
The battle's American victory, led by General Andrew Jackson, enhanced his political career.
Of course it
probably
did.
led to him being president.
Right.
And he, along with Martin Van Buren, founded the Democratic Party.
Damn right they did.
Jackson began a new political movement now known as the Jacksonian Democracy.
Oh, jeez.
This new direction in American politics had a profound influence on the development of New Orleans and the American Southwest.
All right.
One of these developments was the construction of Fort Jackson, Louisiana, a star fort suggested by and named after Jackson, obviously. This fortress was intended to support Fort St. Philip and bar the Mississippi Delta from invasion. Didn't work too good, did it?
They didn't expect that type of ships the Civil War was bringing in.
Right.
Presidents of the Jacksonian Democracy supported the concept of manifest destiny,
Oh, the old manifest destiny.
greatly expanding acquisition of territory in the American Southwest and the support of international trade, along with expansion of slavery. This powerful political movement also produced sectional tension between the northern and southern portions of the United States of America, resulting in the creation of the Whig Party to oppose the new Democratic Party.
The Whig Party, the predecessor to the Republicans, pretty much.
Pretty much. As the political rivalry began, as the political rivalry between the Jacksonians and the Whigs intensified, the Republican Party was founded to counter the spread of slavery into the states produced by territorial conquest of the Jacksonian Democrats.
So the Jacksonian Democrats are MAGA Republicans, you know.
that want slaves.
They're like, well, they're worshiping one guy, and,
Right.
you know, Jackson was be all end all for them.
Pretty much. The victory of Abraham Lincoln, the Republican presidential candidate,
First ever Republican president as well.
election of 1860 resulted in a succession crisis and was a catalyst to the American Civil War. Which
Sure
we know.
was. We know that. By the year 1860, the city of New Orleans was in a position of unprecedented economic, military, and political power. Mexican-American War, along with the annexation of Texas, had made New Orleans even more of a springboard for expansion. California Gold Rush contributed another share to local wealth. The electrical telegraph arrived in New Orleans in 1848, and the completion of the New Orleans, Jackson, and Great Northern Railroad from New Orleans to Canton, Mississippi, which was a distance of over 200 miles, added another dimension to local transportation. Everything went
right.
through New Orleans in the South,
Yeah,
dude.
buddy.
Everything did.
Yeah, buddy. Combination of all these factors resulted in an increase of price of prime field hands of 21%
Damn.
in 1848.
Wow.
Further increases as the value of domestic slave trade grew through the 1850s. By 1860, New Orleans was one of the greatest ports in the world, with 33 different steamship lines and trade worth $500 million. Oh, my
In the
goodness.
1850s, dude.
Passing,
60s,
right,
dude.
and all that was passing through this city. So it was a
Jeez.
gold mine. As far as population, the city outnumbered any other city in the South. Was larger than the four next largest southern cities combined, with an estimated population of 168,675.
Wow. That's like as big as the South altogether, dude. Holy shit. We got Department of the Gulf and the West Gulf Blockading Squadron led by David Farragut and Benjamin Butler for the Union. Then we got Department Number 1 led by Mansfield Lavelle for the Confederates. And don't really say what kind of manpower they got. Maybe we'll get into that. I don't think it was really manpower because nobody battled.
Right.
The election of Lincoln in 1860 inspired Governor Thomas Overton Moore to interdict an effort to make New Orleans a free city or a neutral area in the conflict.
Okay.
A solid Democrat, Moore organized a movement that voted Louisiana out of the Union and a secession convention that represented only 5% of the citizens. Wow.
Whatever.
Moore also ordered the Louisiana militia to seize the federal arsenal at Baton Rouge and the federal forts of Fort Jackson and St. Philip,
Which we heard before.
that blocked the approach upriver to New Orleans, Fort Pike that guarded the entrance to Lake Pontchartrain, and the New Orleans barracks south of the city, and Fort Macomb, which guarded the Chef Mantour Pass.
Okay.
These military moves were ordered on January 8, 1861, before the secession convention. With military companies forming all over Louisiana, the convention voted Louisiana out of the Union 113 to 17.
Dang.
And those 17s were murdered. Probably.
Or
Outbreak of hostilities in the area of Fort Sumter, South Carolina, led to the story of New Orleans and the Civil War.
New Orleans, I mean, it was bound to happen. Mm-hmm. Bound to happen.
Can't just stay neutral, first of all.
No. The Union strategy was devised by Winfield Scott, whose Anaconda Plan called for the division of the Confederacy by seizing control of the Mississippi.
Yep.
One of the first steps in such operations was the imposition of the Union blockade. After the blockade was established, a Confederate naval counterattack attempted to drive off the Union Navy, resulting in the Battle of the Head of Passes, which
Go
we did.
check that out.
The Union countermove was to enter the mouth of the Miss, ascend to New Orleans, and capture the city.
So they're going around into the Gulf, come up into the mouth. Wow.
Which would be closing off the mouth of Mississippi to the Confederate shipping, both from the Gulf and from the Mississippi River.
Right.
Wow. Which were still being used by the Confederate vessels at that time.
Cutting off all supply line, dude.
All supply.
Well, by mid-January 1862, Flag Officer David Farragut had undertaken this enterprise with his West Gulf blockading squadron. The way was soon open, except the water passes past the two masonry forts, Jackson and St. Philip, which are above the head of passes, approximately 70 miles downriver below New Orleans. From April 18th to 28th, Farragut bombarded and then fought his way past these forts, which we've said last episode, managed to get his 13 of his fleet ships upriver on April 24th.
He did.
Historian John D. Winters in The Civil War in Louisiana, published in 1963, noted that with few exceptions, the Confederate fleet at New Orleans had made a sorry showing. Self-destruction, lack of cooperation, the cowardice of untrained officers, and the murderous fire of the Federal gunboats reduced the fleet to a demoralized shambles.
You ain't kidding.
It did too, dude.
Some terrible shit. Historian Alan Nevins argues the Confederate defenses were defective. Confederate leaders had made a tardy, ill-coordinated effort to muster at the river barrier. Fortunately for the Union, both the naval and the military auxiliaries were weak. In all their work of defense, the Southerners had been hampered by poverty, disorganization, lack of skilled engineers and craftsmen, friction between state authorities and Richmond, and want of foresight.
Yeah.
Man, these guys just they're like, man, this is us. If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be fighting this war. And Virginia's like, shit.
Whatever, Richmond, bitches.
Shit.
Well, on the other side, Major General Mansfield Lavelle, commander of Department 1, Louisiana, was left with one tenable option after the Union Navy broke through the Confederate ring of fortifications guarding the lower Mississippi. It was evacuation. The inner ring of fortifications at Chalmette was only intended to resist ground troops. Few of the gun batteries were aimed toward the river. Most of the artillery, ammunition, troops, and vessels, well, they didn't think that nobody was going to get past to Jackson and St. Philip, so that's where all the stuff was committed to, apparently.
Yep.
Once this defense was breached, there remained to face Union troops and warships only 3,000 militiamen with sundry military supplies and armed with shotguns.
Yeah, nothing, basically.
Jeez, dude.
Nothing.
I don't know what shotguns are supposed to do. Why even use shotguns at all?
Right. The city itself was a poor position to defend against a hostile fleet. High water outside the levees. Union ships were elevated above the city and able to fire down into the streets and buildings below. Besides the ever-present danger of weather-caused breaks in the levees, now an even greater threat to New Orleans was the ability of the Union military to cause a break in a major levee that would lead to flooding most of the city. Oh, we all know about that. Possibly destroying it within a day. Oh, we all know about that.
It's amazing New Orleans has even lasted as long as it has, dude.
Kidding, man. Those levees are, telling you what. Lavelle loaded his troops and supplies aboard the New Orleans, the Jackson, and the Greater Northern Railroad and sent them to Camp Moore, 78 miles north. All artillery and munitions were sent to Vicksburg. Lavelle then sent the last message to the War Department in Richmond, which says, "The enemy has passed its forts. It is too late to send any guns here. They had better go to Vicksburg."
Yeah.
Military stores, ships, and warehouses were then burned. Anything considered useful to the Union, including thousands of bales of cotton, were thrown into the river.
They can't dry out cotton? Is it ruined once it gets wet?
Maybe.
What happens when it rains in the field?
They get fucked.
No. It's not like they have big tents all over the fields and shit.
They better hope so.
Doesn't make any sense.
They better hope so.
At 2 p.m. on April 25th, Admiral Farragut sent Captain Bailey, which was the 1st Division commander from the USS Cayuga, to accept the surrender of the city. Armed mobs within the city defied the Union officers and Marines sent to City Hall. General Lavelle and Mayor Monroe refused to surrender the city.
Nope.
Though. William B. Mumford pulled down a Union flag raised over the former U.S. Mint by Marines of the USS Pensacola, and the mob destroyed it.
Oh.
Said, "We will not accept your Union flag."
Right.
Farragut did not destroy the city in response, but moved upriver to subdue fortifications north of the city.
Okay.
On April 29th, Farragut and 250 Marines from the USS Hartford removed the Louisiana state flag from City Hall. And that time, Union is officially back in New Orleans, baby.
Jeez,
By May 2nd, U.S. Secretary of State William Seward declared New Orleans recovered, and mails are allowed to pass.
Hey, look at that shit.
Hey, you guys
Y'all
get mail
now,
again,
boys.
right? For
Dang.
you, dude.
1st of May, 1862. Major General Benjamin Butler.
Butler is a dick.
Butler the Dick. Occupied the city of New Orleans with an army of 5,000 people, facing no resistance at all. Butler was a former Democratic Party official, a lawyer, and a state legislator.
Wow.
He was one of the first major generals of volunteers of the Civil War appointed by Abraham Lincoln. He had gained glory as a Massachusetts state militia general who had anticipated the war and carefully prepared his 6 militia regiments for the conflict. So he already knew. He was like, "This is about to be war, boys." Mm-hmm. At the start of the hostilities, he immediately marched to the relief of Washington. And despite a lack of orders, he had occupied and restored order to Baltimore.
Hey, look at that.
And it has been done since.
Right. I know, right? That was the last time Baltimore's had order. It's been occupied, just hasn't been ordered. As a reward, Butler was made commander of Fortress Monroe on the Virginia Peninsula. There he gained further political renown as the first to practice confiscation of fugitive slaves as contraband of war.
Okay.
This practice was later made a policy of war by Congress. Due to these and other astute political maneuvers, Butler had been chosen to command the Army expedition to New Orleans. Because of his lack of military experience and military success, many were happy to see him go.
Okay.
They're like, this, he was probably all cocky and shit, like, ooh, Lincoln loves me. I'm like, dude, you don't know shit.
I can do no wrong.
And plus, you're a Democrat.
Right. The United States War Department, under Edwin M. Stanton, expected Butler to hold eastern Louisiana and the cities of Baton Rouge and Nolens, maintain communications upriver to Vicksburg, support Farragut's forces for the siege of Vicksburg. In addition, the city of Nolens itself was just as indefensible for the Union as for the Confederates.
Yeah, the Confederates could have easily came back and did the same thing the Union just did. Dude.
Right. Surrounded by a fragile network of levees and lower in elevation than the river around it, Nolens was extremely vulnerable to flooding, bombardment, and insurrection.
January 6th? Oh, my gosh.
In addition, the city was generally unhealthy and subject to devastating epidemics. Yeah, that's too wetness and the humidity.
Mosquitoes and trash and disease and viruses. So, yeah, gross, dude. Gross. New York was the same fucking way in the 1800s.
Disgusting.
It's just gross. Legitimately shit. Like how you see shit on the streets of San Francisco right now, that was commonplace back in the day in big cities, dude. It was everywhere. They just threw their garbage on the road, on the sidewalks and shit.
Out their freaking apartment windows.
Baking in the sun and shit. It's gross. Defense of the city against attacks from Confederate forces depended on an extensive outer ring of fortifications requiring a garrison of thousands of troops. As a conquered territory, Louisiana had a potential for becoming a serious logistical drain on Union forces. Yeah, they could spend all their manpower trying to defend that.
All right.
And an unsustainable front if contested by well-organized resistance movements. It was popularly assumed that Confederacy would launch a major counteroffensive to retake it. As the largest population center of the Confederacy and commanding formidable industrial and shipping resources, its permanent loss would be politically intolerable to the Rebs.
Right.
Well, I don't think they ever, if they did, nothing happened because...
Well, Butler was one of the most controversial and volatile personalities of the Civil War together.
Yeah, you're about to see it.
He became infamous in New Orleans for his confrontational proclamations and for alleged corruption. Doesn't surprise me.
Give the guy a little bit of power, man.
The impression had been created by Confederate officials and sympathizers that Nolens and Louisiana were held by a brute military force and terror. Butler was a political general, awarded his position by political connections, and this political background made his position in the islands tenable until outrage forced his withdrawal in 1862. Butler faced a difficult challenge securing the Confederacy's largest city with a relatively small force. His total military command, about 15,000 troops.
That's not that small. What are you guys talking about? He was not sent reinforcements during the time he commanded in Louisiana, which was between May and December of 1862. Butler stated, "We were 2,500 men in a city of 150,000 inhabitants, all hostile, bitter, defiant, explosive, standing literally in a magazine, a spark only needed for destruction."
You ain't kidding.
His methods of preserving order were radical and totalitarian, even in the North and Europe, with the issue of Butler's General Order Number 28, which we'll see what that is there in a second.
He's OP.
Yeah, he became a dictator, dude.
Right. Wow, the residents of Nolens, notable many women, did not accept the Union occupation very well. Butler's troops faced all manner of verbal and physically symbolic insults from women, he said, including obvious physical avoidance, such as crossing the street or leaving a streetcar to avoid a Union soldier, being spat upon, and having chamber pots being dumped upon them.
Oh, no, that's pee, dude.
Or shit, or whatever. Yeah. The Union troops were offended by the treatment.
Of course they were.
After 2 weeks of occupation, Butler had enough.
I bet.
He issued, it's the only word in English
had
dictionary.
where you can repeat it and it means something different, and it makes sense.
Right. He issued his General Order number 28, which instructed Union soldiers to treat any woman who offended a soldier as a woman of the town plying her avocation.
Basically, treat her as a whore.
Yeah.
Treat her as a whore.
And we all know how whores were allowed to be treated back then.
Mm-hmm. We got a telegram or something.
I think whores were on a lower level than blacks. Or they're just a step
At least
up.
right there,
Yeah, pretty close.
From the headquarters of the Department of the Gulf, New Orleans, May 15th, 1862, as the officers and soldiers of the United States have been subject to repeated insults from the women, calling themselves ladies, of New Orleans in return for the most scrupulous non-interference and courtesy on our part, it is ordered that hereafter, when any female shall by word, gesture, or movement insult or show contempt for any officer or soldier of the United States, she shall be regarded and held liable to be treated as a woman of the town plying her avocation.
That's a freaking communist shit right there.
By command of Major General Butler, General C. Strong, Assistant Adjutant General and Chief of Staff, who was relaying this message, apparently. Yeah, so he had to send that to the Department of War. Like, this is what we're doing down here, man. We're going to start smacking the shit out of these ladies. They don't stop throwing their piss pots on us.
I mean, America, mofo. You don't like it? Don't tell you. Well,
Right.
I mean, what you can do, man? Jeez, oh, Pete.
I mean, you can't be throwing piss pots on people.
You can do anything you
I
want.
don't think so.
That might be like assault, I guess.
It should be. I don't know. They were doing it in the old Summer of Love a couple of years ago, so
Yeah, disgusting.
pretty much the same stuff.
Yeah. The reaction to General Butler's order number 28 was swift, and the outrage against it highly vocal.
Bet it was.
Southern women were highly offended by the order.
Well, stop throwing piss pots.
He was heavily criticized both domestically and overseas, which was a problem as the Union sought to avoid European intervention in the war on behalf of the Confederacy.
They weren't doing shit.
The European was thinking about it. They just wanted to see. And I think by this time they're like,
1862 came up, and they're like, yeah, maybe not. These,
Like, dang.
remember, the majority of these guys are still the guys that kicked our asses twice in a row.
right. Butler became known as the Beast.
He was the beast of burden.
The British House of Lords called it a most heinous proclamation and regarded it as one of the grossest, most brutal, and most unmanly insults to every woman in Nolens. The Earl of Carnarvon proclaimed the imprisonment of women a more intolerable tyranny than any civilized country in our day has been subjected to.
Oh, fuck off, Britain. What were you guys doing in all those islands you would go travel to and take over and God knows what? The hell out of here.
Same shit.
Exactly. Worse.
Right.
The Saturday Review criticized Butler's rule, accusing him of gratifying his own revenge and likening him to an uncivilized dictator.
That's what it is. Why didn't the Department of War do anything?
Well, I don't think they care. They said if he had possessed any of the honorable feeling which is usually associated with a soldier's profession, he would not have made war on women.
No.
If he had even been endowed with the ordinary magnanimity of a red Indian, his revenge would have been satiated before now. It required not only the nature of a savage, but of a very mean and pitiful kind of savage.
Oh, you very mean,
Right.
mean, pitiful savage.
To be induced by indignation at a woman's smile to inflict an imprisonment so degrading in its character as that which seems to constitute his favorite punishment, and accompanied by privation so cruel, it is only a pity that so unadulterated a barbarian should have got hold of an Anglo-Saxon name.
Dude, they hated women back then. Like, majorly hated women.
But these guys are sticking up for him.
I'm saying.
Well, yeah, they weren't even allowed to vote to what, 1912?
Ridiculous.
So, yeah, but everybody in New Orleans, you know, that's the thing to do, though. Even though in New Orleans, everybody's treating the women probably the same thing that these guys are doing, but it's the Union doing it, so it's bad.
Butler tried to defend his command in Nolens in a letter to the Boston Journal, claiming the devil had entered the hearts of the women of Nolens to stir up strife. He also falsely claimed that the order had been very effective. He said, in essence, the effective way to deal with a Confederate sympathizing woman who is a defiant was to treat her as one of an undignified prostitute. That is to ignore her. But many thought the language of the order was ambiguous and feared that Union troops would treat New Orleans women like prostitutes in regards to soliciting them for sex and perhaps even rape, violence,
I don't think so.
beating them down.
I think you treat them like whores and say, stay the hell away from me,
Right,
you whore.
you shut your mouth when I'm around,
Dirty whore.
unless you don't speak unless spoken to. You look at the ground, when you see men. Butler's inflammatory order was so controversial that it caused a significant public relations problem. I bet it did. For the Union, and he was withdrawn from New Orleans in December 1862, just 8 months after taking command of the city.
The most valuable asset Butler commanded in New Orleans was not his army, but his formidable political heritage. Butler was a Jacksonian Democrat in all senses and a populist and a reformer. He had a great gift for identifying with the issues of the broadest levels of the voters, except for, like hating women, and turning them to his political advantage. Here, the Jacksonian political legacy had come full circle in 47 years, from defending New Orleans from the British to securing it from secession. Butler's inscription on the base of Jackson's statue, "The Union must and shall be preserved," was symbolic of his political identity. The inscription echoed Andrew Jackson's 1830 toast in response to a speech endorsing nullification. During what was called the nullification crisis, Jackson stated, "Our federal union and must be preserved." That statement defined Jackson's position against any threat to the Union.
Damn right. The spoils system created by the Democratic Party was also part of Butler's political heritage. Butler believed the advantages of political office should be used to the advantage of friends and supporters. Of course he did. And to suppress political opponents. Sounds like a freaking Jacksonian Democrat there. In general, Butler used these political abilities to play to various factions and interests in New Orleans. As a virtuoso conductor, would inspire an orchestra to ensure his control and reward Union supporters while isolating and marginalizing hostile pro-Confederate factions. Okay?
Yeah, pump up his people, put the other ones down, I guess, right? Butler began his rule of martial law in New Orleans by sentencing anyone calling for cheers for Confederate President Jefferson Davis and Confederate Major General P.G.T. Beauregard to 3 months hard labor at Fort Jackson. He also issued Order Number 25, which distributed captured Confederate food supplies of beef and sugar in the city to the poor and starving. Hey, all right. The Union blockade and the King Cotton embargo had done damage to the port economy, leaving many without work. Value of goods passing through New Orleans had gone from $500 million to $52 million during the period from 1860 to 62.
Dang.
Wow. Dude, that's
significant.
That's 1,000%.
That's ridiculous.
Holy shit.
Man, that crippled that son of a bitch down. Jeez, oh Pete. No wonder why everybody was pissed.
Right.
Jeez. Butler raised 3 regiments of infantry. Imagine how bad they're treating women there. Imagine how bad they treat the fucking men. Those dudes are probably getting their asses beat or murdered half the time in the city.
Don't even know, right?
Butler
Throw
raised,
them in the swamp.
Don't even fucking know it.
Gators will get you.
I haven't seen my husband in 3 days. Mine neither, Nancy. Just those damn unions.
Shut up, bitch.
Shut up, bitch. Suck my dick, bitch. Butler raised 3 regiments. Suck my dick or a hard time at Fort Jackson.
Fort Jackson. Take your pick.
We'll be sucking dick anyway. Butler raised 3 regiments of infantry. The 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd, obviously.
Right.
I'm going to call you the 5th, the 27th, and
38th.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Butler raised 3 regiments of infantry, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Louisiana Native Guards. The Corps d'Afrique from existing free black militia units, which were supervised by General Daniel Ullman. Dang, you got some Louisiana Native Guards, had some black folks in there?
No, that was the Corps d'Afrique. That was their own separate thing. Black people weren't allowed to serve yet.
Right.
At least with the whites.
Right. These black units were unusual in having black officers.
Oh, look at that.
Wow. They served both to add to his forces and to confront the former ruling classes of the city with the bayonets of their former slaves.
Wow.
Butler also used his commercial contacts in the Northeast and Washington to revive commerce in the city, exporting 17,000 bales of cotton to the Northeast and reestablishing international trade.
Look at that. This time we're trading again, just under the Union name in New Orleans. He employed many local citizens in logistics support of the Union military and in cleaning up the city, including an expansion of the existing city sewer system and setting up pumps to empty the system into the river. Gross. This policy helped free the... They didn't even know that. You can't be doing that, guys. This policy helped free the city from the anticipated summer yellow fever epidemic, right? Possibly saving thousands. He extensively taxed the wealthy of the city to set up social programs for the lower classes. Sound familiar? These Robin Hood aspects of his programs provided a provided a broad base of political support and extensive informal intelligence and counter-espionage organization, and provided law and order. And the people still hated him. Mm-hmm. Oh, good for you. You're raised by Butler.
All right. Butler had already done the institution of slavery in the Confederacy considerable damage by instituting his contraband of war policy while commanding Fort Monroe on the Virginia Peninsula. This policy rationalized the retention of slaves fleeing the seceding states by claiming that the Confederate military was using slave labor for military use in the construction of fortifications, moving military supplies, constructing roads, and railroad grades of use to the Confederate Army.
Obviously, they were.
What? I mean, clearly.
Right.
Slaves within areas of Confederate control rapidly spread the word that Union military forces were not enforcing the fugitive slave laws.
Which stated you had to return a runaway slave.
Right.
Yeah.
And that slaves could find refuge within Union military lines and employment as laborers for the Union armies.
Good for them.
Right?
As a result, the use of slaves in the proximity of Union forces became extremely difficult and expensive, since these slaves would flee at the first opportunity to Union lines,
Damn right.
depriving the Confederate armies of their labor and their former masters of what they regarded as their valuable property. Right.
Yeah.
Since the Confederate government was counting on slave labor to offset the greater numbers of Union soldiers, Butler's innovative policy struck the Confederacy at a strategic level, destroying an asset counted on to win the military struggle for independence.
Well, did the South really think that the North was going to give back their slaves that ran?
Not only that, did the South really think that these slaves are just going to sit by and work for them, and knowing that there's Union right over there that's trying to free these guys?
Like, dude, there's Union Army 1,000 yards away, bud.
Morons.
We can run over there right quick.
Morons.
The flight of the slaves in the direction of the Union also diverted the resources of the Confederate military and its government in defense of the plantations and the discipline of their labor forces. Oh, man.
Oh, discipline, yeah.
Oh, yeah. The planters of Louisiana even appealed for aid from Union authorities. To quote one of them, "Our family has owned Negroes for generations. We have no one but yourself and General Shepley and Butler to protect us against these Negroes in a state of insurrection."
Oh, geez. Now they're crying that the slaves are going to uprise against them.
Oh, no. The plantations of Jefferson Davis, located in the state of Mississippi on Davis Bend, 20 miles downriver from Vicksburg, were also disrupted by the Union invasion.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
After Davis's older brother Joseph fled the area with some of the slaves, damn, Joseph, some of the slaves in May of 1862, the rest revolted, took possession of the property, and betrayed the location of valuables to Union forces and resisted any efforts by Confederate forces to recapture the area.
Dang.
The slaves in rebellion armed themselves with guns and newspapers and fought to the death any attempts to infringe upon their newfound freedom.
Oh, shit.
This rebellion within a rebellion began to erode Confederate authority within Louisiana the instant Butler's troops appeared in New Orleans, and as a political fifth column, which was invaluable to his occupation. Yeah, you got the slaves now fighting back, dude. I mean, what are you going to do?
Crazy shit there. The expected rebel counteroffensive came on August 5th in the form of a naval and army assault on Baton Rouge, led by Major General John C. Breckinridge, resulting in the Battle of Baton Rouge.
Oh, we'll get there.
After a hard-fought battle, the Confederate forces were driven out of the city.
Poor guys.
And both Confederate and Union forces withdrew after the battle.
Yeah, nobody cared about Baton Rouge.
Right. The significant aspect of the battle was that it did not result in a popular uprising nor widespread support for Confederate forces in Louisiana. As a result, rebel forces were not able to mount a sustained campaign to retake New Orleans or the rest of the state.
No, just give it up, buds. This can be considered a tribute to the Union consensus built and wrought by Butler's political manipulation and broad-based political support.
Right, he broke these dudes down.
Right. Chester G. Hearn summed up the basis of this support. He said the huge illiterate majority, which was the poorer classes of blacks and whites, would have starved had Butler not fed and employed them, and thousands may have died had his sanitation policies not cleansed the city of disease. He did what the Democrats are trying to do now,
right?
Make you rely on them for survival.
And he dumped sewage in your river water.
Right. Idiot. Well, that's just going into the ocean.
Do we know that? We hope it is.
Either or, yeah. He fed them, gave them money, gave them jobs, and yeah. So they're like, we love this guy now.
Butler's generally abrasive style and heavy-handed actions caught up with him. Many of his acts gave great offense.
Okay.
Such as the seizure of $800,000 that had been deposited in the office of the Dutch consul.
Oh, no.
Consul, and his imprisonment of the French champagne magnate, Charles Heidsieck.
Why?
do anything to guide is champagne. They're talking about the drink. The order number 28 provoked protests both in the North and the South, and also abroad, particularly in Britain and France.
Of course.
Many consider it the cause of his removal from command of the Department of the Gulf on the 17th of December, 1862. He was also nicknamed Beast Butler and Spoons.
Hey, Spoons.
For his alleged habit of pilfering the silverware of southern homes in which he stayed.
That dude was just pocketing silverware.
Oh, man.
Jeez.
He became so reviled in the city that merchants began selling chamber pots with his likeness at the bottom.
Oh, jeez. On June 7th, he executed William B. Mumford, who was the guy that tore down the U.S. flag placed by Farragut on the New Orleans Mint. For the execution, Butler was denounced in December of 1862 by President Jefferson Davis in General Order 111 as a felon deserving capital punishment,
Right.
who, if captured, should be reserved for execution.
Yeah.
Butler's administration did have benefits to the city, which was kept both orderly and healthy. Of course they did.
Right.
The Butler occupation was likely best summed up by Admiral Farragut, who stated, "They may say what they please about General Butler, but he was the right man in the right place in New Orleans." Yeah, man, nobody else is willing to go down there and be a dickhead like he did, apparently.
I guess.
Yeah.
14th September. Nope. 14th of December, 1862. Major General Nathaniel Banks arrived to take command of the Department of the Gulf. Butler was not made aware of the change until Banks arrived to tell him. Contrary to common belief, Butler's inflammatory reign had little to do with his replacement.
Of course, do you think the Union gave a shit?
Political considerations in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio tipped the balance. Democratic victories in Illinois and Ohio on the 4th of November had alarmed the Lincoln administration, and a dramatic letter from Indiana Governor Oliver P. Morton claimed that the states along the Ohio and more in common with the southern states than with New England, and would leave the Union if the Mississippi were not reopened to trade.
Right. There's nothing. Yeah, nothing's coming up to them from the Mississippi, so they're suffering now. Yeah. See, everything's a consequence, man.
You ain't kidding.
These new considerations reinforce the idea by Secretary of State William Seward, one of Butler's political opponents, that an invasion of Texas would be favorably received by a pro-Union group of German-American cotton farmers living there.
Right.
The idea was championed by Banks, a New England political general eager to send cotton to the mills in the Northeast. Banks undertook the siege of Port Hudson and, after its successful conclusion, began the Red River Campaign in the pursuit of Texan cotton.
Uh-oh.
The Red River expedition proved to be a costly failure and resulted in more than wanton destruction and looting than the Butler occupation.
Wow.
So that's all coming up in our future there. Yeah.
Red River.
Red River rivalry.
Red River.
That's the capture of New Orleans, essentially, there. Huh? The taking of New Orleans. Butler was a dick, but I guess it was warranted. Nobody else was going to do it. Smacking bitches and
What you can do,
killing
man?
people and stuff. I mean, jeez.